Hi, everybody.
Good
Welcome
evening,
to the
everybody.
Endurance School.
Welcome to Detention, where you come every Tuesday afternoon to think about what you've done. Tonight, we are super excited to have Marisa Michael on the show. Marisa has been a registered dietitian for 18 years. She runs the company Real Nutrition Dietitian here in Portland, Oregon, helping people achieve health through nutrition. Marissa is not just a dietitian. She's also a regular endurance athlete who has completed several triathlons and running events. And her sport interest extends to the rock climbing world, about which she has written a book called Nutrition for Climbers, Fuel for the Sen, which builds upon her master's thesis from the University of Stirling in Scotland, which examined disordered eating in adolescent climbers. Marissa has spoken extensively on nutrition topics in and around the Portland, Oregon area with her dietitian services, and you can find her on Instagram regularly at Real Nutrition Dietitian. Um, she mobilizes an army of Lego characters over there and provides sensible and healthy advice about eating. Marissa, thank you so much for coming to Detention. We're really excited to have you
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is the first time I've been in detention.
No way. That sets you apart from the other two people who are on this broadcast. We are no strangers to either this detention or actual detention. So, Marissa, we are really excited to have you here. As you know, though I'm not sure that everybody else does yet. Chris and I have been longtime followers of your Instagram. You have a great Instagram account, which we'll make sure to link to in the comments. Can you tell us a little bit about the much beloved Legos, about how you decided to start using them in your posts, and why you think that they help to tell your story?
Yeah, yeah. So I started Instagram, I don't know, a couple years ago, and I realized quickly that it's full of selfies and food styling, neither of which I'm good at. So one week I just decided to do Legos like for a whole week of posts, and I got really good feedback on that, and everybody was like, "I love the Legos, they were so amazing." So I just started doing all Legos all the time and it sort of just evolved from there. But it's actually been kind of fun because I realized through doing the Legos, not only is it distinct branding, like when people see it, they know it's me,
Mm-hmm.
but it also helps kind of serve a good purpose where I try to kind of be more body positive or body neutral. And I feel like the Legos are just a good way to represent that rather than showing pictures of people or athletes or me where people might be looking at body shape or body size. The Lego is just a Lego. So it seems pretty neutral and pretty safe and non-triggering for people.
I love that. That's awesome.
what inspiration do you draw upon for coming up with the Lego sort of dioramas, the scenes? Like, tell us a little bit about your creative process.
I usually just do it based on, I try to keep up with current research. So I'm always seeing new research about sports nutrition and fueling that's coming across. So I usually try to base it on that. So if there's a topic that seems to be on my mind or research that's coming out about certain things, I just try to match the Legos to that. Um, I usually don't do it the other way around. Like I don't have cute Legos that I try to make a post out of. It's usually just, what seems like a topic that's interesting or that people would want to know about or to fill some sort of a void or gap in nutrition knowledge, just trying to entertain and also educate at the same time.
Very cool. Tell us about your Lego collection. How many Legos do you have? What cool characters? Do you have a
I
special Lego?
honestly have no idea. Like hundreds, hundreds, they call them minifigs, the little Lego people. Um, Tons of sets. I have three kids, so I use all their Legos.
Awesome.
I actually don't have very many of my own personal sets. So whenever the kids get a set, I'm like, ooh, I can use this. My daughter is pretty business savvy and she makes me rent her Legos from her.
What?
What is
Yeah.
what is the going rate to rent minifigs?
She charges like $1 for me to like take a picture of like a specialized Lego, something that I need.
Smart.
Yep, she's smart. Yep, she's gonna go places. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome.
I have like, I mean, we have like a whole bonus room just like covered in Legos. You don't want to step on that.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Mm-mm.
Tons of Star Wars sets. I don't even know how many. Yeah.
Star Wars ones are especially pointy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I love that she's like the Lego Baron of Portland, Oregon.
yeah.
It's awesome.
So tell us a little. I mean, so we're Molly and I run a coaching company that is dedicated to endurance athletics. Tell us a little bit about your own athletic career. Tell us a little bit about how you got into sport in the first place.
Oh yeah. I feel like I've always been interested in sports and activity. I did it in junior high. I did it in high school. And I learned pretty quickly that I'm really bad at team sports and sports that involve a ball. Like I have terrible coordination and I just can't understand rules of team sports very well. So I quickly learned I got to be an individualized athlete. So um, I always loved biking. I don't know why. I just did it as a kid and kept doing it through college, just cycling for fun. So, and I also swam a lot, not competitively, but just for fun. So triathlon was kind of a natural fit. When I moved to California, I lived there for a while and I had this group of people that I found kind of like this pod of friends and they all did triathlon. So if I wanted to hang out with them, I had to learn how to run and go cycling. So that kind of started my love for it. I've always just been recreational. I'm not good, I'm not fast, but it's a big part of my life. I've been doing it for probably about 10 years and it's just a lot of fun. I love being able to do three sports in one race. I don't like the idea of trying to do a marathon. That's like too much running for me. But if I can break it up and do swim, bike, run, that's really fun for me. I love all three of them.
Do you have a favorite race from your time in California or here in Oregon that either the race itself or just the particular experience of that day was really memorable?
Yeah, like I did Oceanside, the 70.3.
Great
That was
race.
so much fun. My previous 70.3 had been in Napa, and it was not an Ironman branded one, just another race company.
Was it
And it was,
Vineman?
no, it wasn't Vineman.
Ah,
Vineman wasn't running that year. I don't remember why. I think it was the drought.
okay.
Um, but it was in Vital Sports. I think they're out of business now. But it was brutal. Like they told us, they lied about the elevation gain, basically.
Oh no.
Like it was like 4,000 more feet over the course than
Oh my
you
God.
thought it actually was. So Oceanside was a big contrast. It was nice and flat and fast and it was just a blast. Like it was really cool to be in that environment with, like you could see kind of the elites and the pros
Mhm.
kind of milling around and just like that scale of a race and that venue just being by the ocean and it was just awesome. That was a really, really fun race.
That boardwalk, you
Yeah,
feel like you are just part of it. It feels like you are at the birthplace of triathlon, and
yeah,
everybody in the world is doing triathlon at the
yeah.
same time that you are doing triathlon.
Yeah, really
It's
cool experience. Yeah, and all the residents that live along those roads, they come out and cheer for you and squirt water if you're hot. And I don't know, it's just the whole atmosphere was really, really fun. Yeah.
That is so cool. And what about climbing? So we know that you wrote your master's thesis on climbing. What role does climbing play in your life?
Yeah, so I started getting into climbing because my son, who is now 16, started climbing when he was 11. And he's kind of like me. He doesn't like team sports, he doesn't like ball sports. So we were trying to find something for him. So he kind of latched on to climbing and started doing competitions. Lots of people don't know there's actually formalized climbing competitions and
Hmm.
teams. So he started doing that, and I just kind of got into that. I wanted to learn how to climb with him. I learned how to belay so we could climb together, and we just sort of do it together when we can. And from that, I realized um, there's a huge gap in the climbing world of what to do for nutrition and how to actually fuel. There's not a lot of research around it. And kind of similar to endurance sports, there's a belief that you need to be lighter to be better. And so that can lead into some eating disorders. So I wanted to just research that, fill a gap, start to fill a gap, a huge gap of what's actually going on in the climbing world and how do we serve these climbers better. So that's kind of what led me to do it.
what is your, because we bump into this all the time in the endurance world, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing what your sort of counter argument to the lighter is better,
Mm-hmm.
like what are some of the tactics that you have in that instance when you're faced with a climber who is like really thinking of, that lighter is going to be better, or an endurance athlete who is going to think like, what's the evidence that you sort of trot out to convince that person?
Yeah, well, in endurance, I know there's a lot of research. I mean, we spend like thousands of dollars getting grams off of our bike, right? Like there's that belief that like, okay, if you're carrying like a lighter load across the road, then you'll be faster, which is true to a certain extent, except if you underfuel or lose weight and then you lose muscle mass and then you get injured and then you get overtrained or at least do an eating disorder, and then it leads to like even worse performance than what you started with, or a damaged relationship with your body or with food. So I try to always meet the athlete where they're at and figure out, because sometimes people come to me and they kind of have their agenda set, like, oh, I want to come to you because I feel like I need to lose 15 pounds in order to do this Ironman. And I'm like, but do you? Like people of all shapes and sizes are different speeds, and the weight is only one tiny piece of it. So I try to make sure, and it is true that sometimes if people lose weight they end up being faster, but they're also doing co-current things that so they're training better, they get a training plan, they get a coach, they're eating better, they're sleeping more, so it's like, was it the weight or was it what you were doing anyway to make yourself better and faster and stronger? um, so it is true that some people may need to lose weight, but not at the expense of getting an eating disorder or disrupting their relationship with food or getting an injury. So I talk about that with climbers as well. I work with a lot of runners and triathletes, but I also work with climbers. There's not as much research on climbers, but there is probably like 10 studies that definitely say, they look at weight, they look at body composition, and they say, does this affect climbing ability at all? And the answer is like very little. Like it's like 1 to 4% maybe. And the rest of it is just like, how experienced are you? How many years have you been climbing? How strong are you? How flexible are you? How much endurance do you have? Like all of those things are trainable. So I try to focus more on the trainable aspects and getting a good nutrition program and a good strength or endurance program in place rather than focus on weight loss.
My experience with climbing nutrition has always been through like those videos of like free solo where like somebody's living in a
Oh yeah.
van and eating just like garbage.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions that come along with like devoting your life to sport. I remember as an age group swimmer that like we were trying to find the soda that had the most carbs in it. So we drank
Mm-hmm.
Mountain Dew because we heard that carbs make you go faster.
Mm-hmm.
What's a big misconception that you hear about as a nutritionist that you feel like is important to keep an eye out for?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I feel like misinformation in the nutrition world is rampant, and it's really hard to know what's actually true or evidence-based and what's not, because a lot of people are putting themselves out as experts, but they're saying incorrect things. So I think like seriously, if I were not a dietitian and I hadn't been doing this for 18 years, I would feel very lost and probably misinformed and probably thinking wrong things. So I totally have sympathy for people that aren't in this field because they're searching around, they're Googling things, they're trying to understand what's right. You hear like keto's bad, keto's good, low carb, high carb. You hear all this stuff that's contradictory. So I feel like big misconceptions are out there on really prevalent, loud issues like keto or gluten or like things like people think they maybe need to avoid foods that they don't. Like, oh, I should only eat organic, which isn't necessarily true, or I need to avoid non-GMO or GMO foods, which isn't true. Like, so I feel like there are a lot of things like that that are really prevalent in marketing and in the nutrition world, that there's really strong messages, but they aren't actually accurate or promoting your health. Basically fad diets. Yeah.
Diets that have a book associated with them.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
This may be like kind of the, like sort of the $1 million question for your industry, but like when you have somebody who comes in with that, with that fad diet, with that misconception, like tell us a little bit about how do you move them away from that, that way of thinking?
Well, yeah, that's actually probably the hardest, most awkward part of my job. Usually, when people come to me, they want to hire me to get my advice. So they're usually in a place to listen, which is good. Sometimes they're not, or they have really strong misconceptions about things, and it takes a while to kind of work through it. Um, but I don't discount what they believe or what they feel, because I feel it's very important to acknowledge and validate that. So maybe the science says that keto actually is not really great for athletes, especially endurance athletes, but they've been trying keto and maybe they feel better. So I'm going to help support them in that and help them understand what it was that helped them feel better. Like I wouldn't discount their own personal experience, because each body is unique and individual, and maybe there is a body of evidence that says like keto actually isn't great for endurance athletes or for performance, but there's also outliers.
Hmm.
There are always people in every study that respond really well. So I'm not going to discount them or shame them or tell them that they're wrong. I'm going to try to understand their own experience, and we work together to figure out what's working for you, what's not. Maybe they tell me they've tried, I mean, I'm just throwing out keto for an example, but maybe they're telling me they've tried keto for a while and they felt better, but it was difficult to follow. And they also had like, some other issues with like just um, food relationships. Like maybe they were becoming more disordered and they felt that. And so then you kind of were like, well, what's more important? What's your value system? Like, what's driving this keto? Does this feel like it's important to continue, or is it more important to, restore that relationship with food or be able to engage with social situations where you can eat more things, you know? So I try to just kind of take them where they're at and figure out what works for them. And I never have an agenda for them. We set the agenda together. Like we set the goals and the plan together based off of their own personal experiences.
So another thing we see a lot of, I think, is people really struggling to like extrapolate that relationship that they have with everyday food to what
Mm-hmm.
they are supposed to be eating while they're training and
Mm-hmm.
racing.
Yeah.
So like people avoiding sugary foods and like carbohydrates in their everyday life, and then struggling to like incorporate them in training.
Mm-hmm.
What are some misconceptions that you've run across in training and racing nutrition?
Oh yeah, that's a really good one because it's very hard because we all know like, well, added sugar probably isn't the best for your body.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also need, 60 grams or so of sugar per hour while you're on a bike
Right.
ride. So it's like, okay, so, where's the that seems disconnected. So I try to help them understand basically making foods neutral. So foods can have a purpose. It doesn't have to be good or bad or healthy or not healthy. If you take away that morality or that ethical part of food and you look at it as just neutral, you can be like, okay, so we want to support health in other areas of our life. But if I'm feeling like I actually do need some sugar for my exercise, if you can approach the sugary food as a neutral food, you can understand that that's actually really helpful fuel that's quickly digested, get in your bloodstream, power that ride or power that run. And if you can look at food in a more neutral manner, sometimes that helps just take away that stigma or that like, oh no, I'm eating healthy or not healthy, and distill it more down into like almost like a scientific concept where it's like, well, your body doesn't think that red vines or gummy bears are bad. It just sees the molecules. It's just a simple carbohydrate sugar molecule that it will use and utilize and digest and metabolize. So to kind of like help understand the biology sometimes helps people, in not too sciencey way, but also evidence based. Just seeing foods as something that is useful rather than maybe bad or unhealthy. Does that kind of
Um,
make sense?
Hmm. Absolutely.
I'd love to get sciencey and nerdy here for a second,
Okay.
because and I think this is sort of building off of what Molly just asked. The question of the insulin response
Oh
during
yeah.
exercise,
Uh-huh.
and driven by taking in sugar, and I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what the insulin response is outside of training, why we might want to avoid it there, and then what is going on during training and racing with your insulin response, which
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the insulin response is a normal biological response to eating food. So insulin is a hormone that basically takes glucose and puts it into your cells for fuel. So that's a good thing. We want that. Insulin response happens if you're operating normally, like you're not diabetic or insulin resistant or pre-diabetic, like in a normal healthy body state. Insulin response is a useful tool for your body to get fuel into your cells. And it happens with not just carbohydrates, it happens with protein as well. So sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to be hyperinsulinic or I don't want to increase insulin too much, so I'll eat protein. Well, guess what? Like protein also creates an insulin response, but that's good. That's how your body uses that food. So within normal, just everyday living, that's a very normal thing to eat food. Insulin is secreted, and then it is digested. Like part of the digestion and metabolism is it just takes it up into the cells, right? So when you're training, when you're actively working out, it can be a little bit different. We know that afterwards, your cells are a little bit more sensitive to insulin, which is actually really useful because if you've depleted all your glycogen stores, which is the storage form of sugar in your muscles, you've used that all up for that training session. You actually like the idea, like it's advantageous for your body to have more insulin response after training and be more insulin sensitive because that means the insulin can take up, put it back into that muscle cell, store it as glycogen, set you up for the next training session. So that's actually a really helpful response. So it only becomes problematic if maybe you're not insulin sensitive or you're having some diabetic or pre-diabetic issues where you might need to see a dietitian and endocrinologist or a doctor to figure out how to fuel and train right to make sure you're not having these highs or these lows or that you bonk you because you didn't have enough insulin to really utilize the glucose going on. Does that make sense? Is that too well,
Yeah.
is that
That's
like
great.
No, that's great because I
Okay.
think, one of the things that, we're always like, we're always talking to athletes about eating after workouts and like
uh,
that there's this period of time and,
yeah.
and of course, like all numbers get thrown around all the time, but like, who like, but it's nice to have an actual explanation like of why that is a useful time period
Yeah.
to do the glycogen uptake and
Hmm.
synthesis.
Yeah, and it's not, yeah, it's muscle protein synthesis. So there's a lot of different body processes that happen, not just the insulin and the glycogen storage or restoration. So there's like, it's building and repairing muscle tissue. And there's a lot of other like training adaptations that happen when you train. Your body stimulates some, it's a little bit of inflammation, but it's acute and it's useful because that stimulates a fitness response to like be able to tolerate that better. So that's happening, that you've heard of like the window, like when's the window of time where I have to eat, get those training, get that recovery on the go. Um, Anywhere between like 30 minutes to 2 hours is a good time to eat a full meal that includes both protein and carbs and fat in it because you want to restore, give your body basically the nutrients to restore all those things that you just broke down a little bit. But your body's actually adapting even 24 to 48 hours after that workout.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, as Chris said, there are a lot of things that get thrown around, though, about misconceptions, and then some good ideas, and then lots of numbers and rules, and I think people end up
Mhm.
really confused pretty often.
Yeah.
If you have someone who comes to you with just no idea about how to fuel for their next competition, where do you start with them? Like, what do you say to that athlete?
Oh, yeah. Well, I asked them like almost like what are their pain points? Like, what's your problem? Like, why did you come to me? What's not working for you? So I get anything from like, I just kind of feel fatigued, or I want to go faster, or I keep bonking, or I'm having diarrhea on the bike, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. So we figure out what the problem is, like what prompted them to be able to come to me, and then we work through that basically troubleshooting, trying to figure out what's going on, uncovering the root of the problem. If they just kind of want general fueling information, usually if they feel comfortable with it, I'm very careful with this because I don't have everybody track their food. Sometimes it's actually really harmful to track food. But if they feel comfortable with it and it's not harmful for them or triggering, I have them track for maybe like 3 to 7 days. And we just look at what that is and where we could tweak. Like, oh, maybe we realized, oh, you're really fatigued at your morning workout and you also didn't eat since like 5 p.m. the night before and you're trying to work out at 9 a.m. We need to add some fueling before your workout, or we need to add a bedtime snack or whatever it is. So I try to just kind of make practical, like useful solutions rather than throwing a bunch of numbers at them. Some people really like the numbers and they like the data, and if they like that, we work with that. And if they're just like, I don't want to track numbers, tell me how I can just eat and what kinds of foods to fit in my life, then we work that way.
Tell us a little bit about why tracking food can be problematic,
Oh, yeah.
and kind of a two-part question. Like,
Yeah.
since so much of what you do is kind of about like figuring out what's going on,
hmm
um, if you have somebody who you're like, oh, food tracking is not a good idea here, how do you do your job?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, food tracking can be triggering if they have any kind of history of eating disorder or disordered eating, because the eating disorder, it's kind of playing into the eating disorder or the past eating disorder where you get too focused on food. It becomes a little bit obsessive. Maybe you can't tune into your hunger and fullness cues or any kind of internal body cues, and instead you're just relying on the app to tell you what to eat and how much to eat. So it can disrupt that relationship with food where if the app is telling you to eat 2,000 calories for that day and you've already eaten all that and you're still really hungry, some people will just not eat because the app told them not to. So I try to always make sure that people can still honor those internal cues and understand how their body is trying to tell them what to eat. So it can be, I don't know if you guys have ever tracked before, if anyone listening has had this experience, but you can kind of feel a little bit obsessive. Like you're always sort of thinking about that, or like, how many calories is this? Or, oh, I need to go track in my app. And how much do I have left for today? And so that can become a little bit disordered. So if I can't have them track, or if it's not practical, or it may be harmful for them to track, there's still other ways to figure it out. So I can tell them, specific personalized nutrition principles for them. So it might be like, we're not tracking how many calories you eat, but I can tell you that I know, they don't have to know that you need around like 30 grams of protein after your recovery workout, for your recovery meal. So I can give them examples, like a list of just foods, like here's some options. And they don't have to know what the grams or the calories are, but they can just know the food to eat. And some people want that anyway. They don't want to know the numbers. It's just overwhelming or it's just not useful for them. So there are other ways to work around that if they're not tracking or they don't want to track or it's just not practical or useful for them. And another, I have them sometimes just track how they feel. Like I have a sheet that I use quite often with people where you just write down the time of the day that you ate, you write down what you ate, and you rate on a scale of 1 to 10, like what was your hunger level? And then after you eat, what was your fullness level and what was your satisfaction level? Like, was that food even satisfying? Did you even enjoy it? So you can track that way too to kind of tune into internal cues and see what's going on.
That's really interesting. So how did you run into the idea of intuitive eating, and what was it that spoke to you about it?
Yeah, I don't remember when I first learned about intuitive eating. It was probably back in school. Um, so for those listening that may not know what intuitive eating is, there's sometimes a misconception that intuitive eating just means eat anything you want, no matter what, whenever you want it, right? Like eat all the donuts and all the ice cream.
That's how I heard
Intuitive eating is actually
it.
10 core principles that kind of guide how you determine what to eat. So a big part of it is honoring your hunger, honoring your fullness levels, and finding satisfaction in food. So you can eat all the kale you want, but if you hate kale, you won't be satisfied. You'll always be searching for other foods to eat. Um, and then another really big part of intuitive eating that most people miss or don't understand is called gentle nutrition, which means honoring your body, fueling it well, honoring that health aspect of nutrition. So intuitive eating doesn't mean you're just eating all the donuts and all the ice cream. It also means you'll actually want to nourish your body and care for it if you're truly living intuitive eating principles. So I first got into it, I don't even know how many years ago, just, going through school, I learned about it. But then I really like it because it, um, it basically gives people power to have control over what they choose to eat and how they should eat and how much they should eat. And it's not arbitrary diet rules. It's not someone dictating you like you can't have any white potatoes and you need to cut out sugar or anything like that. It's all foods fit, all foods are good. It even honors the part where it's like emotional eating is okay because eating is a big part of satisfaction and joy in life. And I really love that piece of it, that it's not shaming people for eating food or enjoying food. Um, it's just a really neat framework to live by, where you're being able to honor health, but also be able to enjoy food and find that satisfaction and have a good relationship with food. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's. I'm for everyone out there. I'm presently taking Marissa's class on intuitive eating, and so many things that you've already talked about today seem to be based around the idea of just like is like kind of getting away from the idea that like food is just this like external thing that we put into. It's like that we just stuff into our bodies. You know
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like most of the world views it as like separate, like
Mm-hmm.
there's us and there's food, and like everything that you've kind of described talking about is that a lot of what you do seems to be more kind of like behavioral therapy and
Mm-hmm.
like integrating the ideas of like food and people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that aspect of it because it's not just me as a dietitian dictating to a client what they should eat. It's acknowledging that food is a big part of our lives. It's a big part of joy and satisfaction. It's a big part of our cultural experience. Think about if you've ever gone out to eat with someone and you're on a diet. Like how miserable is that? Like, oh, I can pick the salad off the menu and that's it, or going out to some event where there's food served to you, and if you feel like you're restricted in any way, it's just not a fun experience. Like you can't engage in it as much. So it's acknowledging that food is more than just fuel, but also food is fuel and it's nourishment, and it can support everything that you're trying to do in your life, support all your goals. It shouldn't really detract from your goals. It should be able to support your goals. So for triathletes, like sometimes food might become sort of a chore. Like I'm exercising so much and I just have to fuel my body, and sometimes it is a chore, but we want to also preserve that joy within that food.
I think somebody in chat just made an observation
Yeah.
about that exact thing.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That the
Oh,
more I
they
try
said
to nail down my nutrition and fueling, the less fun it is to eat, and it becomes a pain.
yes. And see, that's not fun at all. Like, especially COVID 2020, all this crazy stuff that's going on. Like, don't we want to have as much joy in our lives as we can? We don't want it to
Absolutely.
become a chore. And sometimes it does have to be a chore a little bit, especially with endurance athletes if you're really trying to chase a goal. Or you guys might have experienced this when you are training a lot. Sometimes your appetite is suppressed and you need to eat, but you just don't feel like eating. So it can become a chore that way. There's workarounds for that, but yeah, is as much as possible trying to feel like food is your friend. Food is something that can get you toward your goal.
So
What
I have
does
a sorry.
uh, I just have a quick follow up to
Yeah.
this one, just
Yeah.
because uh, so you know the way that Molly and I interact with our clients is like we write training plans for them, we talk with them on the phone, we answer emails, texts, stuff like that.
Mhm.
What does working with you look like?
Oh yeah. Um, it depends on what the person needs. I work one on one with people. I just moved out of my office because of COVID. I set foot in it like twice in 4 months. So I'm doing virtual for now. Um, so we have a virtual visit. I always have an intake form that they fill out first, where it just asks their health history, normal eating patterns, labs, medications, stuff like that. So I already have some information before our first meeting. And then on our first meeting, we kind of come together and they tell me what they're looking for. I ask how I can support them in their goals, and then we make a plan from there. So the frequency of the visits just depends on how intense it is or what they need or how many questions they have. Sometimes I only see people for 1 or 2 times and they get all the help they need and they feel like that was enough and they got all the information, they asked all the questions, they have a plan and they're good to go. Sometimes they meet with me more regularly, especially with eating disorder clients. Like I'm seeing people a lot, frequently, and for a long time because that takes a lot of healing to happen. Um, and then I also give them any kind of tools they need to support in between sessions. So I give them, handouts or sample meal plans or whatever they might need, or write down their own personalized goal. I do set boundaries where I don't have people like texting and emailing me constantly because that would just be overwhelming for me and probably not helpful for them. My business model is kind of terrible. I actually want to give them all the tools they need so they never have to see me again. Because I feel like if they get enough nutrition information and they get some tools and skills, they can just go off on their own. So I'm not dictating a diet plan to them and they're not reliant on me to have to always do it over and over again. It's like you get the tools, you get the concepts, you get the information you need to be able to implement it on your own. And sometimes people come back to me, like 6 months or a year later, and they're like, oh, I just need to check in. Something changed. I just need a few tweaks. So it's really dependent on what they're looking for and what they need. I'm always respectful of their time and their budget.
You were right in line with us on that. That whole idea of like athlete empowerment and like owning training, owning nutrition, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I think we will work ourselves out of a job if we are
Yeah.
really good at what we do. But
Hopefully, we will have people that need us.
exactly, find them. So my question is, and I know that I got this wrong earlier. I apologize. The difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian. What is it that led you to the degree certification that you got? And what is it that how do they specialize? I guess.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So dietitian is like a regulated term. It's like nobody can call themselves a lawyer or a doctor unless you've gone through the schooling and you're licensed. Same with dietitian. You can't call yourself a dietitian unless you actually are one. Nutritionist is just a generic, non-regulated term. So literally anyone can call themselves a nutritionist and they're not breaking any laws or regulations. So that's where the distinction lies, where if you're getting a dietitian, you're getting specific training. Like all of us at least have to have a bachelor's degree. Most of us have a master's. You have to do a year-long internship. You have to pass an exam. You have to adhere to a code of ethics. You have to do continuing education throughout your whole career. So it's just more robust. So a nutritionist could be anybody from somebody just calling themselves that and like getting their degree from Google, or it could be someone that maybe took some sort of a quick cert course, like maybe 3 to 6 months, sort of a certification class or something like that. Lots of those classes, in my experience, have been not evidence-based and very sketchy. There are some nutritionists that are amazing and valid and people that you could listen to and get good information from. Especially nutritionists that have some sort of degree. Like you can get a bachelor's degree in nutrition, so I would say, of course, if someone has a degree or if they have some sort of valid training, like if you're not a dietitian, that's still okay. You can listen to that person. They're going to know what they're talking about. But the dietitian is just a regulated term. Like you kind of know what you're getting with the dietitian.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And the dietitian usually is more from a medical lens. So we're trained to be able to help people with disease states. We know how to interpret labs. We know what medications are, things like that. So if you're looking for just nutrition help and you find a nutritionist, you might be fine. But you'll want to find a dietitian for something like an eating disorder or diabetes or heart disease or something like that, where there's some sort of a medical issue in play.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one that I've always wondered about. What is the difference there? Kind of staying on that theme of like differences between things. Could you talk about the difference between climbing nutrition and endurance nutrition, if there are any differences?
Yeah, there are some, because endurance, I mean, if you think about endurance, like depending on what event you're doing or what you're training for, you can go a really long time, hours and hours. So it's more like steady state, that endurance kind of zone. So the nutrition would have to be pretty regular, regular feeding, regular hydration, preventing bonking, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit different if you're thinking about like fueling for some sort of a triathlon or running or cycling event versus training for or fueling for like a climbing event. So climbing is more intermittent. It's definitely more strength. It's definitely more power. Well, I don't know. There is some power, of course, if you have to sprint or you want to get some kills in, passing somebody. But there's just it's just a little bit different movement patterns, a different muscle recruitment. Um, so with climbing nutrition, depending on what kind of climbing they're doing, it can be pretty different than like endurance. So it would be more like, oh, we're working on making sure that you're fueling your muscles, that you're having muscle recovery. They usually have like a periodization where they're having like a strength and then an endurance block. And so, fueling for those different things. There's several different types of climbing. So if you're like outdoors, you could actually, some people hike for a couple hours just to even get to the crag and then they start climbing. So then it's like endurance and strength, So you just kind of have to ask them what they're doing for climbing, what's going on. There's speed climbing. Have you guys ever seen that? It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
It's like two identical routes and you basically have to race up the routes and the elites can do it in like 8 seconds or less. They just like scramble up the holds, and so that's obviously like very explosive, very quick. You would train and fuel differently for that than for like a multi-pitch all day, climbing trip where you're sleeping on the wall and climbing the next day. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, climbing is nuts.
I mean, I imagine that it does get similar when you're talking about differences like that between, just like endurance, we talk about the difference in muscle fibers,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're doing type 1 or type 2,
Right.
and all of that stuff. I imagine imagine the speed climbing stuff is like super, you're basically working with a sprinter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 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 And in the Olympics, they have, it was going to be 2020, but now it's 2021. Speed, lead, and bouldering. So not a lot of climbers did speed climbing. They were used to kind of like the slower endurance strength routes. And then Olympics threw speed in the mix. And now all these climbers have to learn how to speed climb, which is kind of like asking a distance runner to learn to be a sprinter. Like they're very different.
Yeah, triathlon is shifting to the sprint format next year, but that is not the same change.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the difference between an hour and 45-minute event versus a 55-minute event, which
right,
is still
it's
very
still
much
kind
an
of,
endurance.
Yeah, still endurance. Yeah, sprint tries are so much fun. They're so fast and
They're so good.
They're just a blast.
So we have a question from chat, and we kind of touched on this in the pre-broadcast talk that we had in my regular consumption of ice cream over the last couple of weeks. But Sporty Jenny G asks if, as her training hours have stepped up, her crazy desire for sugar outside of training has also totally gone up. Any strategies to try and cut back? And then asks if maybe she should just stop going to Sparrow, which doesn't sound like it's the right answer to me.
Yeah. So your body might be telling you that you need more food. Sugar cravings are pretty common when you're underfueled or even just not eating enough carbohydrates. So usually someone's response or their knee-jerk reaction is like, oh no, I'm craving sugar, I need to cut back. But especially with endurance athletes, it's probably your body just saying you actually need to eat a little bit more. So make sure you're just fueling enough, eating enough food. Try to remove the guilt and the shame. If you feel like you are craving sugar, that's totally fine. Endurance athletes have a massive carbohydrate need, so the sugar might actually be useful to contribute to that need throughout your day. If you feel like it's not helpful for you, or maybe you're having some bowel disturbances if you're eating a lot of sugar, you can try switching it up, eating other carbohydrates. So like maybe some more whole grains or fruits or vegetables or starchy vegetables like potatoes and sweet potatoes or something like that. But usually sugar cravings are not to be dreaded. They're just your body giving you a cue saying like something's off, like something's weird. So if you can tune into that and understand that it might be telling you you're under fueling a little bit. But seriously, like, I mean, again, like we talked about this, I can't remember if this was pre-chat or on this, but the body doesn't judge those things. It's just molecules, it's just incoming fuel. So it knows it needs some carbohydrates to restore the glycogen and to fuel your load of what you're asking it to do. So if that comes from ice cream or if that comes from potatoes, your body's like, sweet, I will use either one. And obviously, potatoes would have more fiber, more vitamins and minerals. But, if you're getting it through ice cream, that's also okay. It's still calories, it's still useful for you.
This is a really helpful talk for me. Thank you.
I highly recommend Handel's ice cream.
And for the rest of you guys out there who are watching, please feel free to drop questions in over the next like 10 minutes or so as we start wrapping things up a bit. Marisa, what changes in the nutrition world in the last few years that have you seen that have excited you?
Oh, yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about intuitive eating. I feel like that's becoming almost a buzzword now, and it was sort of unknown. Like the book was published, I think, 25 years ago. Dietitians have known about it forever, but for some reason it's coming to a head. And that's actually really exciting to me because intuitive eating is really evidence-based. There's actually over 120 studies about it and how useful it is for not only health, but for body image and for food relationships. So your mental health as well as your physical health. So that's really exciting to me that it seems to be more of a household term, like people have heard of it and they sort of know what it is, which I think is really cool because it's probably a long time coming.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
I've been really enjoying going through the class and learning more about it. It's really challenging a lot of like the you're like sort of just the preconceptions that I've had around food and fueling and things like that, and
Yeah,
it's been just really really helpful and cool.
that's awesome. Thank you. That's glad to hear it. Yeah. I think another thing that's good is with all the misinformation and disinformation, I feel like the science community is communicating better and getting a little louder about using evidence-based nutrition and science-based practices. Um, I think social media, for all of its good and bad, there are some really great scientists on there that are putting out a lot of content that's actually usable and understandable and fun. And I think that's really cool to see people doing that kind of a thing rather than just all the hype or the fad diets.
I love how little shame there is in this idea of like you eat the things that like you want to and it's okay. Like
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Um so if you were able to if somebody gave you the like one of the billboards in Times Square that you could like get a message out to like a huge amount of people, what message would you get out to them? Like what would you choose?
Oh, that's such a great question. Can I put my business website on there?
Yeah, totally. That's just smart.
Well, I
That's
don't
just good
know.
sense.
I mean, I guess kind of the thing we've been talking about, like just I would have to come up with a catchy phrase for it, but something about like, foods can be neutral or like don't overthink it, like just enjoy your food, something along those lines where it's like just take away that guilt and that shame because we know from a huge body of research that obsessing about healthy food, overthinking it, avoiding it, restricting it is actually more harmful for mental and physical health than just eating the stupid cookie.
Right.
So I like that balance of the mental and the physical aspects. So something catchy. Can you guys come up with something for me? Eat the dang food.
I like that. That's a good one.
Eat the dang food. Yeah. From a Lego.
Yeah, exactly. Lego cookie and a little
we have,
Lego minifig.
yeah, right.
um, let's see. We have a few questions rolling in from
Yeah.
chat. This is just a good, like a great, like, what are some suggestions you have about really effective pre-workout pieces of fuel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, anything that's quick to digest. So we want quick digesting carbs. They don't have a lot of fiber, they don't have a lot of fat, they don't have a lot of protein. So like a piece of fruit, if you can tolerate that, even fruit juice, pretzels, like a white mini bagel, graham crackers, dry cereal, applesauce patch or pouch, those little like things you see toddlers
Oh yeah.
sucking on, stuff like that. Like just something that's really quick and easy. Even just Gatorade, drinking some. It's basically sugar water with electrolytes. So that's really, really helpful if you haven't eaten a while and you need it pre or during your workout. Um, if people are interested, if you go on my Instagram, my handle is Real Nutrition Dietitian. And if you click on my link in my bio, I have like a free downloadable fueling guide. So it lists tons of things like that you can eat before and during and after workout.
Awesome. That actually may answer our next question too.
Okay.
That was so after like big training days or races,
hmm
times when your body is really depleted.
hmm
What should you try to focus on for nutrition and recovery for those days?
Yeah, eating enough volume of food is important to be able to restore and start that recovery process. Um, there's some pretty cool research about the timing of food. So if you eat, like if say you need like 100 grams of protein in a day, if you eat 20 of it throughout the day and then eat the other 80 for dinner, that's not as good as eating like 20 kind of spread out regularly. So same with carbohydrate, like you want to be able to kind of eat at regular intervals. That helps just sort of get a regular supply of nutrients in your body as it's repairing and rebuilding and going through that process. So, like a good post recovery meal, like after a hard workout or hard training session or a race, um, uh, be sure to rehydrate for sure, not just with water, but with electrolytes as well. And then your meal should be um, anywhere from like 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate minimum, and then about 20 to 30 grams of like a high quality protein, some fats in there. Fruits and vegetables are really helpful. They're antioxidants, give it some anti inflammatory properties. You get a lot of vitamins and minerals from that. So, just kind of a mixed meal. It's like, eat some tacos, eat a rice bowl with some chicken and some veggies, a burrito, um, a sandwich with a smoothie, just stuff that people kind of normally pair together anyway, but just making sure you get enough of it, like enough calories of that.
You had me at eat some tacos.
Eat the tacos.
See, I think the last question we're going to go out on, unless somebody else drops something in the chat in the next few minutes, is a two-parter that we ask a lot of people. What's something that you have grown more relaxed about during your career? And this can be like, either like your professional career or racing or anything like that. And then what's something that you've gotten more exacting about? Something that you've
Yeah,
gotten less relaxed about
yeah.
over your career?
I think I've gotten more relaxed about letting go of my own agenda for my client. So when a client walks into my door and they tell me what they need and what they're looking for, and I know their health history, I can assess that right away and know what I would want to tell them and what I think is right for them. But I have learned not to dictate that to them because sometimes that's actually not what they need to hear. So getting more relaxed about not saying like, well, this is evidence based, or this is what the recommendations are, and rather meet them where they are and figure out what's going on in their own lives to be able to help them create their own tools and their own agenda rather than me placing something on them. So I've gotten definitely more lax about that. Me
I
just like
love
kind of
that.
dictating what they need. Something more exacting. Um, I guess this sounds sort of paradoxical, but almost like being more science based, which has served me really well. I mean, that's kind of my philosophy, and that's how I'm trained as a dietitian. We're supposed to be evidence based, and that's in our code of ethics. So I've always kind of been a stickler for that. Um, but I've become more evidence based, and that has actually served me to become more lax about my own agenda because the more I understand about nutrition science and the more I discover, the more I realize we kind of don't know what we don't know. And if I'm telling someone, yeah, we know for sure that endurance athlete needs carbs, and they're sitting in front of me telling them they don't feel very good on carbs, I'm not going to then tell them that because the science tells us that we need carbs, but the science also tells us there's some people that have gastrointestinal issues with it. So it's like in going into science and understanding the drawbacks and the nuances, that's actually helped me as I become more exact in really understanding the evidence base. It helps me support that client better. I don't know if that made any sense at all.
Absolutely. I think that was
Molly
great.
and I were talking just yesterday about that. The same thing you were just talking about that agenda that we have as coaches for our athletes and
Hmm.
trying to be careful of that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Honoring the
then
athlete, honoring their goals, honoring their experiences.
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, I think, I mean, we talk about that second part with our athletes a lot. It's like that process of learning a musical instrument where, like, I mean, you really have to like learn your scales, like you
Hmm.
have to like learn the science,
Hmm.
especially as a coach. But then, like, yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time. I mean, I feel like the more that Molly and I have learned, the more that we have moved our coaching more and more towards like, okay, how do you feel?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Again,
Right.
like those internal cues, like listening to your body is
Mhm.
really helpful.
Hmm.
Yeah. How do you feel today? How's this working for you? Hmm.
Because if that's not right, then nothing else matters.
Yeah.
We do have one last question in chat.
Okay.
Kirby would like to know what your thoughts on whole food plant based diets are.
Yeah. So that's kind of a term. The history of it is, from what I know, it's Dr. Colin Campbell and his forks over knives thing in the China study. So he kind of coined that term.
Hmm.
It's not a very precise term. So if someone says like whole food plants based, you're like, okay, that sounds cool. Of course we should be eating more plants, or of course we should be eating less processed food. Like that's always healthier for your body. So it's sort of a nebulous term that is like, well, yeah, go for it. Um, if we're talking about specifically Dr. Campbell or the forks over knives stuff, there's a lot of problematic things with his methodology and his interpretation of the research. So I try to steer people away from like specifically him. But yeah, plant based is helpful. Also, plant based doesn't mean you have to be vegan. So you can eat a lot of plants and still have animal products in your life. And I think sometimes people hear that word plant based and they think, like, oh, now I have to be vegan. And that's actually not true. There's mixed research on this. The current state of the evidence, most people have a consensus that omnivore, vegan, and vegetarian diets, there are no better or worse health outcomes across those. So it's like how you implement them. So like an omnivore diet can be super healthy, and so can a vegan diet. A vegan diet can have a lot of nutrient deficiencies, so can an omnivore diet. So there's not really any strong evidence that kind of pulls one or the other out that says this one is superior for health outcomes or for chronic disease or even for sports performance. So it's just making sure you're getting enough nutrients, that you're getting enough calories, that you're getting enough protein, these kinds of things within whichever diet you choose to do. So like if someone comes to me and they say I want to be plant-based, I ask them what they think that means or what they want to do with it. you know, Same with like the whole foods concept. Less processed is usually better, except you're not going to be wanting eating like whole quinoa on your bike. You need like a goo. That's super processed, but that's actually what you need right then. So just take it within context.
I love it.
Marisa, thank you so much for
You're
joining us
welcome.
in detention today. You are definitely much better behaved than Molly and I are.
Yeah.
So yeah, we hope that you have enjoyed your first visit to detention.
It was awesome. Thank you
We'll
guys for the
get you back.
opportunity. It's been great.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
so
This
much
is
for
so
being here.
helpful.
Everybody out there, you can find Marisa in a whole bunch of places. Go check her out on Instagram at Real Nutrition Dietitian is the place that you will find all of the Legos. You can find her on the World Wide Web at realnutritionllc.com is her website. I dropped into chat the link for her book, nutritionforclimbers.com, and send her a message, work with her, do all of the things. We really believe in the stuff that she is doing, and she fits so perfectly with everything we try to do at the Endurance School and CBCD. So we really hope that you all avail yourselves of working with this amazing resource. A whole bunch of big thank yous are
Yeah.
flowing in right now, Marisa,
Oh, thank you
to chat.
guys.
So people definitely really appreciated it.
Thanks
Um,
for taking your hour. It was an honor. It was a pleasure.
All of our
so
athletes belong in detention.
they do. Ooh, we just got a best detention. Nice.
Ooh,
Um,
we've had a lot.
so all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us. And for myself and Molly, we will see you tomorrow morning for Amy VT Yoga. And then we will see you back here Thursday morning for our group Swift Ride that Molly is running this week. So
Yep.
make sure that you are connected with her on Facebook and Swift so that you can actually show up. But until all of those things happen, thank you so much for joining us. And here's to a happier and faster tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.